You probably think your grandparents lived in the good old days, when life was simpler and people lasted longer. Right now, somewhere in the world, a doctor is telling a patient they'll live past 90, thanks to modern medicine. We're told, again and again, that humans today live longer than any generation before us. But here's what nobody tells you. Deep inside caves in Spain, scientists found something that shouldn't exist. Skeletons of people who lived over 30,000 years ago, with worn teeth, healed bones, and signs of an age modern doctors don't expect from cavemen. If ancient humans were supposed to die young, why do some of these bones tell a very different story? Tonight, we're opening a mystery that changes how you see human history. If you love uncovering hidden truths, hit subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from right now? To understand what those bones were really saying, we have to go back further than most people imagine. Not centuries, not even a few thousand years, almost 2 million years, to a time when early humans were just learning to survive alongside lions, hyenas, and disease, with no medicine at all. For a long time, scientists believed the average lifespan back then was around 30 years, and that number stuck in people's minds. It became a kind of myth. Ancient humans, weak and short-lived, barely making it past their 20s. But in 1994, two researchers named Rachel Kaspari and Sang-Hee Lee did something nobody had done before. Instead of just looking at average age at death, they studied adult skeletal aging, focusing only on people who had already survived childhood, and asking how long they lived after that. What they discovered shocked the anthropology world. The old 30 years average wasn't measuring how long humans could live. It was being pulled down by something else entirely, something almost every ancient society dealt with: infant mortality. Children dying young dragged the average number down, making adults look like they died early too, when in reality, many of them didn't. Strip away the babies and children who never made it past their first few years, and the story of ancient adult life starts looking completely different, and the difference is much bigger than anyone expected. So here's what's strange. If some ancient adults were living far longer than we assumed, why did history teach us the opposite for so long? The real story begins with a pattern archaeologists noticed at burial sites across Europe and Africa. Some skeletons belonged to individuals who were clearly grandparents, people who'd lived long enough to see their grandchildren grow. This mattered more than it sounds, because in evolutionary biology, there's a concept called the grandmother hypothesis, first proposed by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes in the 1990s. The idea is simple but powerful. If older individuals stuck around long enough to help raise grandchildren, gather food, and pass down survival knowledge, entire communities benefited. Groups with more surviving elders had better chances of raising healthy children, teaching hunting techniques, remembering which plants were poisonous, and passing down stories that carried critical survival information. Living longer wasn't just a personal advantage. It was a group superpower, and evolution rewards superpowers. Fast forward to the Upper Paleolithic period, roughly 40,000 years ago, and something interesting happens. Kaspari and Lee's research showed a dramatic increase in the ratio of older adults to younger adults compared to earlier hominin species. This wasn't a small shift. It was one of the sharpest increases in adult survival in human evolutionary history. Suddenly, grandparents weren't rare. They were common enough to shape entire cultures. If you're starting to feel like ancient humans were tougher and smarter about survival than we give them credit for, you're onto something. And if this is blowing your mind a little, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part gets even more surprising. So far, we've only talked about survival. We haven't even touched on what their bodies were actually capable of. Everything changes once you look at what their bodies could do. Because it's not just about how long ancient humans lived, it's about how they lived while they were alive. In 2007, a study analyzing hunter-gatherer societies like the Hadza in Tanzania found something modern medicine didn't expect. Elderly hunter-gatherers, people in their 60s and 70s, were still walking long distances, still gathering food, still physically active every single day, right up until the final years of their lives. Compare that to modern life, where many people spend their final 10 or 20 years managing chronic disease, sitting for most of the day, relying on medication just to function. Ancient humans didn't have hospitals. They didn't have heart surgery or insulin shots. But many of them also didn't have obesity, type 2 diabetes, or the heart disease epidemic we see today, conditions largely fueled by modern diets and inactivity. This is where longer life starts to shift meaning. Scientists distinguish between two very different things: lifespan, simply how many years you exist, and healthspan, how many of those years you spend actually healthy and functional. Multiple anthropological studies now suggest that while modern humans may have a higher maximum lifespan thanks to medicine, many ancient adults who survived childhood had a longer health span, more years of strength, mobility, and vitality relative to their total lifetime. That's the whole shift. They weren't necessarily living longer in total. They may have been living better, for more of the time they had. Once you see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere in history. Take the Roman Empire. Skeletal studies from Roman-era burial sites show individuals who survived past age 15 often lived into their 50s, 60s, and sometimes far beyond. Numbers that surprised historians who assumed ancient Rome was a place where everyone died young. The truth is, childhood was brutal throughout most of human history. Disease, malnutrition, and unsafe childbirth killed enormous numbers of infants and mothers. That tragedy is real and shouldn't be minimized. But for those who made it through those dangerous early years, life could stretch on far longer than modern assumptions suggest. This changes how we should think about progress itself. Modern medicine's greatest achievement isn't necessarily stretching human life into old age. It's protecting children and mothers during the most dangerous years, the years ancient humans could rarely control. Vaccines, clean water, safe childbirth, antibiotics, these didn't just add years to the average, they gave millions of people the chance to reach adulthood at all. So when we say modern humans live longer, what we're really measuring is a massive reduction in early death, layered on top of a body that in some ways hasn't changed much for tens of thousands of years. Adults who beat the odds of childhood were often just as capable of long, strong lives as we are today. Sometimes healthier, simply because their daily life demanded constant movement and simpler food. The mystery isn't why they died young. The mystery is why we ever assumed they did. So the next time someone says modern life made us live longer, remember, it mostly made childhood survivable. The real question isn't how long we live. It's how well we live the years we're given. If this story changed how you see human history, share it with someone who needs to see it too.